Hello. A new report into the effects of Brexit on UK manufacturing does not make for easy reading, particularly on the day the government's new white paper on levelling up has been published. The two, of course, are very much interconnected. Called Manufacturing After Brexit, it's produced by the research group UK in a Changing Europe, which is funded by the government's own Economic and Social Research Council. Professor David Bailey of the University of Birmingham Business School co-authored the report. David, welcome. What have been the Brexit pain points for UK MFG? How much pain has it caused and how much more could it cause?
If you recall back when Boris Johnson first agreed this deal with the European Union, he said that the deal avoided non-tariff barriers. Now that clearly isn't the case. Non-tariff barriers are back and in a very big way. We're seeing lots of extra costs for business in terms of customs regulations and formalities and form filling, lots of extra time and hassle in terms of complying with rules of origin rules in order to avoid tariffs, and of course the processing of goods coming in and out of the country is taking longer. So we're seeing long tailbacks, for example, at Calais and Dover. In turn, manufacturers have to deal with that by stockpiling, again adding to costs. So what we're seeing from the trade deal and Brexit is extra costs for business. Now that was what was forecast in many ways, and we're starting to see the forecasts of economists starting to play out. So far, imports and exports down. In the case of exports down by 14%, and imports down by 24%. So what we're seeing is more barriers in trade between the UK and the EU, and manufacturers having to deal with that, not only in terms of the extra costs, but starting to rejig their supply chains.
And also talk from the government of tearing up some existing EU-based legislation, replacing it with our own, perhaps promising regulatory divergence, which could indeed add further costs to UK manufacturing.
Yes, and there's no desire on the part of UK manufacturing for that regulatory divergence. We've looked at a number of different industries: automotive, aerospace, pharmaceuticals, chemicals. They don't want to diverge. They've put a lot of time and effort into complying with these regulations, and having two different sets of regulations means extra costs for them. I mean, in a sense, we're now in a position whereby the UK has left the European Union. It has the right to diverge, and we've put in place barriers to trade, but we're choosing not to because really there doesn't seem to be much sense in it. And if we do go down the route of diverging, for example when it comes to data, which is a big issue, then there may be an issue come 2025 when the European Commission takes its view again on the adequacy of our controls over data. So if we diverge, there'll be further costs.
The Levelling White Paper has been published today, as I mentioned, and it's designed to address regional inequality in the UK. Now, manufacturing, I would contend, and I know many others share this view, holds the key to a lot of the ambitions in the White Paper, and yet it struck me that it was barely mentioned at all.
I would absolutely agree with you on that, and there's a number of different dimensions to this. So firstly, manufacturing, as a proportion of economic activity, it directly and indirectly is very significant in the Midlands and in the north, for example. So supporting manufacturing in those regions is going to be absolutely critical. Bear in mind as well that manufacturing is hugely important, not only in terms of exports, spend on research and development, but also in paying good wages. Manufacturing on average pays about 15% higher wages than average in the UK economy. These are good jobs, so if you want to level up, you need to support good jobs. There's another Brexit dimension there, in the sense that Brexit, as we know, is having an impact on trade. It's those manufacturing regions in the North and Midlands which traded most with Europe, so they're most affected by Brexit. So Brexit is actually going to make levelling up more difficult.
It's interesting that the government's got quite a lot on its plate at the moment, and big ticket items. It talks about its platform for growth. Of course, it's got net zero following COP26 and the Levelling Up White Paper today. This is a wildly changing landscape. It requires tremendous coordination, ideas and money, and yet they seem not to be sort of trying to wrap them all together and find a common way forward. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would, and I think that goes to the essence of my critique of really how the government is proceeding. We've got these major challenges, not only in terms of dealing with Brexit, but also in terms of net zero, embracing Industry 4.0, and levelling up. And approaching those needs to be done in a strategic way. And what we call for in the report is actually a much more joined up, better funded, and holistic industrial strategy. Sadly, the government has scrapped the previous industrial strategy. Some of the elements from it have seemed to have made their way into the Levelling Up white paper, but it's a bit of a hodgepodge, and I don't think we're doing nearly enough in terms of developing a kind of regionally based industrial strategy. One other element there that I think is important is that much of the previous approach to industrial strategy was based on participation, and that was about bringing together government and industry in a process of dialogue to discover challenges and opportunities, and then think about what to do about them. It's not clear to me that that process of participation has continued. What we tend to see, I think, with the government approach towards levelling up is the centre doling out bits of money to certain places, and that kind of top-down approach hasn't worked very well in the past.
Finally, David, we know this is a government ideologically disinclined to support industry, preferring to let markets run their course. But those markets include foreign competitors whose governments take quite a different view, and I think manufacturers may be rather cautious about that.
Yes, I think that's right. So, what we've seen, for example, in the UK is one argument around Brexit is that we can do things differently. One of the things that the government pointed out in its benefits of Brexit report, which was a long read but rather thin gruel in many senses, was that it could take a different approach towards subsidies. So there's a new subsidy control bill, which says basically it can have a new approach towards state aid. The amount of support we offer in terms of state aid is very limited compared to several other European countries, for example. We've always spent less on that, and we never really exploited the space we had, even within the EU, to properly support manufacturing. We kind of hid behind EU state aid rules and said, actually, we can't do that. We probably could have done a lot more. So now we're in a position where I think the government needs to show what it's able to do in terms of targeting key technologies, sectors in different places, and trying to join it up in the way that you said. I don't really see much evidence for that thus far. Interestingly, in Europe, for example, much more happening at both a regional level and national level, and at the European level in terms of their Green New Deal. So there's a danger, I think, that UK-based manufacturing is going to lose out because we're not supporting it enough. Just to give one example of that, big race on in terms of investing heavily in battery manufacturing. UK is lagging behind several European countries. Government has put about £800 million on the table. That is way below what is available in the European Union and at individual country level states.
So it would seem to me that UK manufacturing, if it's not very careful, could find itself fighting with one hand tied behind its back in the future.
Yes, I would agree with that. I think we need a much better joined up industrial strategy. And just coming back to that levelling up white paper that's out today, Boris Johnson made a comparison with the challenge that faced Germany in terms of reunification. So he himself has made this comparison. Germany spent about £2 trillion on reunification. That equates to something like £71 billion per year. The amounts on offer in terms of the levelling up white paper is about £4 billion. It's a drop in the ocean.
David Bailey, thank you very much indeed for being with us. We'll keep an eye on this story, of course, because it ain't over yet. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. This has been a special report from Manufacturing TV. I'm Nick Peters. Goodbye for now.